Alright, guys. So today we're gonna be reacting to what 1950s real men thought and felt and did and didn't do. Okay. I watched this video has like 3 million views. I want to react to it. Always going to the past and just make sure that we have better understanding of what man who was years before with the current situation that we have, where we don't even know what a man is and a woman is. So there's a lot of confusion out there, but going back and just having a stronger base might help us to understand some of the things. Just give me a little, give me 1 second. There you go. Much better. Hopefully that can work. So I'm gonna be reacting to it. Hey, make sure that you hit the subscribe button. We almost in 1,000 subscribers. Make sure that you share comment that help the YouTube channel algorithm to make sure that we get to that 1,000 subscriber. Gonna really appreciate it if you subscribe. One thing, what the hell with this light thing? Oh, whatever. So let's react to this. What 1950 real men thought and felt and did and didn't do. Let's go.
He was very young. He was in his early 50s, in fact. And my father was in the grocery business, and my mother continued on with the business. And I never liked the business, and that's when I started driving a cab. And I used to do the things that most guys my age, like say 23, 24, and so forth, in that age bracket. We used to hang around what we called what was the hot shop in those days. That was the local hangout, and that was one of Marriott's first ventures into big business as such. And we had a certain hot shop uptown that every night, just like clockwork, we'd go up there because we knew somebody would be there. If you've ever watched that show on television, Happy Days, it's the same type of thing, where the crowd assembled every night. And these were not teenagers now. These were young adults, I guess you would call them. And from there, everything emanated from there. I mean, we'd go out, get something to eat, we'd go to a movie, or go to a burlesque show or anything, and we'd even wait till late at night, 2 o'clock in the morning. We'd take a trip over to Baltimore just to get a sandwich or something. We were that type.
Wow, Baltimore.
And we used to do the same things. The kids in those days were a little different. I mean, we'd go out on Saturday night. We'd dress to the T's. I mean, we'd have, in those days, the big thing were the ducktail haircuts and the suede shoes and the one-button rolled jackets, double-breasted overcoats, and you always wore a hat because if you didn't wear a hat, we were always told that we weren't completely dressed. So we wore a hat everywhere we went.
Interesting.
We looked like the junior mafia almost walking down the street. And generally we'd go to the beaches in the summer on the weekends. We'd go up to Atlantic City. We'd go to the local beaches down near Annapolis on a Sunday afternoon, get dates just like anything else. And some of the guys were into gambling, and they'd go have their card games. They'd go to the racetrack. Everybody had their own little thing that they used to like to do, So we just had a general easy time of it. It was a good period of time for us. I mean, life wasn't too complicated. We didn't need brand new cars like some of the kids have to have today. We had, well, for me, I had cars that were always 10 years old. And I was always used to pray and hope that they would get me where I had to go for the most part.
Humbleness.
I was sort of
very
daring
humble.
In a way. I'd take
very
the car
humble.
on long trips and never worry about it. I might have 2 bald tires on there. Things like that didn't bother us. I mean, we weren't reckless, but still, we just had an easy time of it. It was just a easy way of life. In fact, the big fad came out. I have to laugh when I think about it. It was called cardigan jackets. They were sport coats without collars. The musicians started the fad. And I remember I got my first one, and my father looked at that, and to him that was so way out, he couldn't believe it. And even though I was wearing a tie and shirt, very neat, with the suede shoes and my perfect, I couldn't understand that jacket, though. And when I look at the kids today, some of the things they wear, and I look back at that was mild compared to what they're doing today, with their clothes.
Wow.
So the 50s were a good period of time. See, my father was a little different. As long as he had a roof over his head, he was from the old days, he believed in having a roof over your head, food on the table, and clothes on your back. Nothing fancy. If you had one car that ran well, he was satisfied. He was easily satisfied. That's one reason I don't drink today, maybe, because it wasn't in the house. I never thought of it, and I don't even like the taste of it, really.
Wow. A lot of information here. You see, there was no drink in the house. There's no drink in the house. and he doesn't have to think about it. Think about a lot of the things that we have today or we see today where people are reckless. Are they reckless because of the generation or because of parenting? You see? Because oh, let me just what the hell? There you go. Parenting is complicated, folks, because you have to really watch what you say, watch what you do, because your kids are gonna mimic. My daughter, my oldest daughter is 18 months, and she start now just replicating what we say, and we don't curse, we don't behave badly in front of the kids, right? When we have our arguments, or differences, we do it aside, but never in front of the kids. We don't scream at the kids. I use my dad voice, but I don't scream to my kids because I know that can affect them. And he's hearing or listening what he's saying regarding alcohol, it makes a lot of sense.
But, my life was rather simple at that time. I mean, my mother used to get up in the morning, make everybody breakfast, and we'd be running to school or work or whatever we did. And my father would go off to work, down in the store and all. And I'd come home at night, and next time I'd see the family, it'd be evening, when I'd get off from work and all. And we'd eat dinner, and then that's when television was just coming around. I mean, we got our first set in '47, but it was still black and white in the '50s yet. And we used to come upstairs and watch the various shows, and my grandmother was living then with us. And my grandmother was, at that time, probably in her 70s, and she loved anything rough.
Look at those
I mean,
hands.
it had to be football, it had to be the wrestling
Hands
match.
are like
Another big thing in those
Stop,
days
they
was the
tough
roller
hands.
derby. That was very popular on television. She loved it. She went crazy for that thing. And that was generally the way things were. We used to like to watch the boxing matches in those days. They were very popular on 2 nights a week. You had the Pabst Blue Ribbon fights and the Gillette program. One was Wednesday night and one was Friday night. And they always had the greatest fighters in the world in those days. We thought that the 50s produced some of the best fighters that there ever came about as far as that went. The Redskins were milling along, as they have this year anyway. And that was our other thing we used to watch. And, of course, we had baseball. That was a big thing for me personally. I loved baseball. And I used to love to go out and watch the old Senators.
love to watch baseball.
Really, that was
There's nothing better to go to the ballpark, smelling the hot dogs outside, and drinking beer and be with the family. Nothing better than that.
my team. I don't care if they were last place every year. They were still my team, You see, I come from a family. My mother was born in Russia. She came here when she was 5 years old.
Wow.
And my grandmother and all her brothers and sisters from Europe, they used to always say for years before all this, the communist threat, as they called it, they used to say, you can't trust the Russians, they used to say in those days. Don't believe anything the Russians tell you. And that was sort of drilled into my head, that the Russians were bad characters, you don't mess with them, or you can't depend on them or anything else. So that was sort of in the family, It was always talked about. And we'd get over to my grandmother's house. In those days, she lived with, my grandfather was still living, And they'd talk about the world events. And then I remember back in the '40s even, when Walter Winchell was on television. On radio, on radio. And everything would stop. And everybody would crowd around the radio and listen to Walter Winchell. And the first thing he mentioned about the Russians, zap, everybody start babbling amongst themselves,
Wow.
But the Russians, to my family,
So that means that the family back then, they will have these kind of conversations, but it was more serious. Because you don't see a lot of people sitting down listening to the radio. My woman knows about politics because I sit down and educate her about politics. But it's not because in her family they used to do it. No, 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 no. In this case, they used to do that because it's responsible for us to make sure that our counterpart understand the world that we live in. Okay? And family didn't understand the importance of being not educated. That's not the word, because the education, you can just go to a school and just get a degree. That's education. Informed. That's the word I'm looking for. Informed about externals and domestic events. Not by emotions, not by anything that has to do with my body, my choice, all that stuff. No, no, I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about understanding the ramifications of decisions. That's a very important conversation that we need to have, not emotional conversations. Emotional conversation is what we have right now, and it's not working. And it's not only in the United States. You got people have to understand this. It's not only in the United States. It's a phenomenon of conscious that is just putting us in a weird place, different from this guy that's completely stoic. He's like, no, well, yeah, we used to do that. It was not a big deal. Stoicism. Stoicism is something that has been come up lately. Something that I really adore with my heart because it does provide a lot of numbness to stupidity. And I'm very appreciative that this kind of information is available for us and we can appreciate it.
Family always seemed like a constant threat of some sort. I was born in a neighborhood in southeast Washington, about 5 blocks from the Capitol building to start off with. Show you how I grew up in a way, get a little background into it. And my neighborhood was always half black and half white in that area I lived in. And those people had been living there, the families, we hadn't, but the others in the neighborhood, been living there for some of them 100 years, the families.
Wow.
And
Wow.
everybody in the neighborhood called each other by their first name. And my father always told me that you have respect for everybody that's older than you. So I don't care who they were, black, white, Chinese, or anything. It was Mr. So-and-so and Mrs. So-and-so and that sort of thing. That's the way we grew up as kids. We were taught this. And if I was over there, I had a couple black friends I used to play with. And if I was over one of their houses, around dinner time, the mother would say, "Are you supposed to be home for dinner?" I'd say, "Well, I guess so, you know." She said, "Well, that's all right. I'll call your mother and tell you you're going to stay here for dinner." And my mother would do the same thing at our house.
Wow.
And if they were there playing.
See, compare with what we've been portrayed today, that was not a thing. Hey, and it's coming from the horse mouth. Maybe racism was not a big thing back then. Huh? He's talking about it like it's not a big deal. Maybe it was not a big deal. We're talking about Washington, D.C. Think about that, folks.
With me, we'd eat dinner, and we never thought about it. We were integrated before integration ever became the fad, so to speak. And the only difference was in Washington, we just didn't go to schools together or the movies together. I think that's about the extent of it. We used to go play football every day. We used to go, play in the streets. And
Was
those
not a
days,
big
we used
deal.
to play games right in the streets. We used to play hockey on roller skates and things like that. We never even thought about it. The whole issue, it seems, came up in the 60s. And I was almost stunned in the 60s in a way from all this, the integration and everything. Not from the, in the 50s too, when they started, in the early 50s, when they integrated the schools and all. And then it dawned on me, what's been going on all these years? We've had separate schools. I didn't think about it in those days. Never even crossed my mind. One of the big things that I noticed, and I couldn't stand it at the time, it just got to me. Who was it? I think it was George Wallace or Faubus. I forget which one stood in the school door. I forgot which one it was, and wouldn't let the black kids in. It was going to block the kids from. Wallace, that's right. And Wallace stood there, and I said to myself, how can a man do that? I just don't understand. I have a soft spot in my heart about kids anyway. And the thing is, I can't stand to see a kid denied an education, which every kid should have. And another thing, I can't stand to see kids go hungry, which I think is one of the total disgraces in this country when we have hungry kids on the street. But that got me thinking. I'm saying, what kind of people are these down here? Then, of course, you used to see the movies with the Ku Klux Klan running around, and burning houses and everything else. And I guess maybe I don't understand cruelty from one person to another. Maybe that's the bottom line. I don't know. I really don't. Right now.
Again, folks, I think this is coming from the horse's mouth. I think this was not a big deal back then. And people wanted to make it a big deal because we had it good, and we have it good. So people don't have problems. They want to create problems. I think that's what happened in the 1960s. That's what I'm getting right now.
In this part of the 80s, the last part here, we're finally seeing a little peace coming about that they were fighting 30 years ago about. And basically, it's the communists. I mean, it's not so much, but yeah, the kids were right in a sense about getting out of Vietnam. I will give them that. They should have got out of that. That was a stupid war, a stupid thing all around. We got involved in it, and we got in too deep. The French were the only smart ones. They walked out of there and left it. And they said, that's enough. We've had enough. They almost went bankrupt in France from that war.
Wow, I didn't know that.
And we should have learned from the French how much money they lost, and they couldn't win it. So what did we have to jump in for? And now I see the benefits of not being in all these wars and everything. Kids are plenty smart today. They can get a good education. I don't say they are getting a good education, but they can get a good education. A lot of this is stemmed back from the 60s. They push for a lot of different things, reforms. I don't know exactly which ones, this, that, and the other, but a lot of things have happened to us now. We're doing pretty well in this country. I mean, we have a little financial problem, deficits and all that, but that's government. I mean, they will have those. But the only bad thing that's happened now, I don't know why, but we don't seem to be educating the kids as well as we should.
This is almost, I don't know, 60 years ago, folks. Or whatever, how many years this interview happened, I don't know. That was a couple of years ago. And that was a concern back then. And it's a major concern now. Okay?
You see any of that as a result of some of the
Well,
60s and what they did to education?
Yeah, in the 60s they were laid back and a little too easy and, like they didn't care. And maybe some of that rubbed, these kids today, they see some of that. Maybe they picked it up a little bit, I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say.
He's talking about the hippies.
It's a shame. A big country like this with all the power and money and resources that we have, we can't do any better.
Become lazy.
Than what we're doing in the school system here. I don't mean to bring us into it, but still the school system should provide an education for these kids, and a good education. In fact, I can't understand why a kid can't go to college without any money. It's always been a thing in my craw. I can't understand why it's got to cost $10,000 a semester to go to school.
No, that's cheap, though. $10,000 per semester, that's cheap. That's cheap. That's very cheap. Today, 70,000, 100,000. Yeah. It's the federal, right now it's just inflation plus printing money. We have to eliminate that stuff and just let a couple universities just go bankrupt. That's my opinion. Get bankrupt, and just let the competition do his thing. Okay? And we have too many colleges, man. We have too many colleges because they're taking advantage of the federal government. And the federal government is keep incentivizing these bad schools.
Kids can't afford it. College should be one step after high school. Just like you go from junior high school to high school, you should go from high school to college. And if you're not college material, at least go to a trade school after that, some type of technical school or trade. But make sure these kids get some kind of foundation so they can have decent lives. I was still relatively young, and here I am. I drove a cab, and I was driving a sightseeing bus in the spring and summer and all. I was putting in long days, anywhere from 10 to 14 hours a day some days,
Wow.
Depends on what happened. And we'd work overtime down at the bus company, and I'd have to work down there 15, 16 hours some day, just to run the tours. And in the season, some days I worked 7 days a week. When they got shorthanded, I had to come in on my day off and everything. And I didn't particularly appreciate these kids lolling around doing nothing, and here I am out there killing myself to keep a family going.
Wow.
And even today, I can't appreciate it. I still hack, and I'm still putting in my 12 hours a day.
Wow.
And as you can see, I'm not.
You can see it, man, in his body. You can see it, his body, a little chopped off, right? A little beaten. But respect for that, man. Respect.
That young anymore, and when I see people just philandering their lives away like that, and just letting things go.
Yeah.
It gets to me, I guess, That's the way those guys appeared to me in those days. They just didn't care, They thought they were going to live off of somebody else. And God forbid you should ever give in to them and give them something, then you never get rid of them, too. They just hang on, you know what I mean? Just like leeches. And I just couldn't understand it. I guess, like I say, I'm born in a different era when things were different, people were different. And even from that time, the 60s till today, the people have changed. They're a lot more lax today than they were even in the 60s. I feel.
Mm.
I don't know. I see this on the street all day long with the, running the cab and all. People aren't considerate today like they used to be.
Mm.
And that's another thing. Those kids in the '60s, they weren't considerate in a lot of time, in a lot of
Mm.
cases. They could care less
But
what
why?
happened to you.
What happened? What happened? Because 50s and 60s, it's only 10 years. What happened that really changed the culture? What happened? That's the first question. What happened differently? The only thing that comes to my mind is just the civil rights era, right? But beside the civil rights era, there has to be a moral code behind it, right? What is that? What is that moral code? That's the question. And then from there, we can just identify and point at it. And even him, he's noticing that there were some changes that made it not understandable for him to perceive why these kind of actions are being taken, or why these kind of attitudes are being present at this day and age. I'm just
Yeah,
saying.
it seemed to me some of them were so sweet that I couldn't believe them. I didn't know whether it was an act or what. But the minute you crossed them, I found out one thing. The minute you crossed their mind up with anything, like they were acting ultra sweet about something, oh, you poor man, or something like that, they'd come on with. If you did anything to disrupt their routine, you could see the ugliness come out in some of them. It
Wow.
was amazing. Not that I'm a big judge of people, but back in their mind somewhere, they had a lot of ugliness too. Not all of
Ah.
them, but a lot of them. And
So they were acting in kindness, not to be judged, but then it's like it's like a double sword. So they were not really kind. How can I say this? It's like pretending to be kind, but inside your heart you are you're the opposite of kindness.
I don't know, they were different. And it got to me, like I say, because all me and all my friends were working hard, people younger than me at that time, in fact, relatives and friends. And we were, like they say, we were busting our hump trying to keep up with things, keep the rent paid, food on the table, clothes on the kids' back, send them to school, send them on their projects, their field trips, and have money for all these things, then have a little money left over at the end of the week so you could take your wife out to a club or a movie or something. So life wasn't really disappointing. At least you got something out of it. But you had to work. I mean, there was just no way you could get around it. But I remember one incident in Georgetown. They told the kids out there, it was back in the '60s too, that they didn't like the way they were dressing. They were sloppy and everything, so they told them that they're going to have to wear jackets and ties to class, sport coat or a suit coat or something. So the kids wanted to rebel, but they didn't know how to do it. So they did. They got all dressed up, and what they did, they didn't wear socks. I thought that was funny in a way. To me, it struck me funny. That was their way of rebelling, but that was a gentle way of rebelling.
Mm.
So that I can go along with because it got a little humor in it, and
There's
they
some
weren't bad
class to it too. There's a class to it. The class. They have class.
kids. They were pretty decent kids, but they had to find a way to make a statement, and that was it, not wearing socks. And I don't know whatever became of that regulation as it was, but I think when you get older, you get a little more cautious anyway, more so than when you're young, because when you're young, you don't
Stupid.
think about a lot of things. You do it, spontaneous.
Stupid. You
When
think
you get
you're
older, you
invincible.
think out things a little more. You get a little on the cautious side, and you're not going to jump into something real quick without thinking about it.
Yeah.
And I guess it made me that way. I mean, I became a little more conservative as time went on, and I think everybody does. Everybody becomes, from Democrats, they go to Republicans when they get older. It's always.
Interesting statement because I've been saying the same thing. The more older I got, the more conservative I got. And I've seen people that has been stuck older than me in the other side. Something's not okay. Something is not okay up there. Something's not okay. And I'm not judging anybody here, but it's just my observation. A lot of things are coming up right now. Let me just let Mr. 1950s guy finish.
Seems that way.
And I'll give
Everybody I
you
ever
my
talked to
opinion.
when I was young, they were all Democrats. Now I find that half the people I know are Republicans now. I don't know why, but that's the way it works out. Now, my father once said to me, I'll never forget this as long as I live, he doesn't like a reformer, or as he used to call him, a do-gooder in office. He used to call them do-gooders. And I said, why, Pop? He says, because every time they get in office, it seems like all the businesses go out. Nothing happens in business. They make it tough for a guy to operate in business. Then he would, add on to it. He says, I only want a man in office that I can get to. He says, that's the
Mm.
American system. And he says, and that system works.
Mm.
And I used to poo-poo the thing. I'd say, you can't be serious. I was full of ideals. I was going to set the world straight. And all. I said, you can't be serious. He says, when you get older, you'll understand what I'm saying. And as I got older, I started understanding what my father had said. And it made a little bit of sense. I mean, I still can't condone a guy going out, just out and out stealing, you know what I mean, a politician and all that. But it seems to work in a sense, that system of you take care of me, I'll take care of you, and this, that, and the other. Like up in New York many years ago, they used to have what they used to call the ward healer. In every ward in New York City, they had one guy you used to go to with all your problems. He'd get you jobs, he'd get you health
Oh, I
care,
see,
he'd get
yeah.
you food and everything. Well, when Lindsay became mayor up there many years ago, he wiped all that system out. And now what happened was everybody came down to City Hall to get what they needed. And
Oh,
City
that's
Hall
a good
couldn't handle
point.
it. So they
That
wiped,
is a good
they
point.
cut
That's
off their
true.
left arm, cut off, what's the old expression? Cut off the nose to spite the face. And that's what
That is a good
happens.
point.
I don't like to be real liberal, and I don't like to be real conservative. I like somewhere dead in the middle, moderate, I guess is the better word to use. I don't like crowds, first of all. I mean, after working out on the street all day long, smelling these gas fumes and arguing with people over the fare in the cab and having bratty kids breathe in my face with colds and give me the cold I've got, things like this. When I get home at night, believe me, I shut the door and I stay there. The only way I know anything about the outside world nowadays is what I see on television with the newscasts and the documentaries that I watch.
Wow. Wow. Respect to the guy. We're not that far away. We're not that far away from. Let me just have Mister here. Okay, so like I was saying, let me see. Let me just pick it up from what I was saying. It is true. There's a transition that you happens to do when you become older, more conservative, right? Might be responsibility, understanding the system, economics, right? And I think it comes down to simple, practical economics. You get money, you want to save it, and it seems to work. You want your government to work the same way. Get money, save it. Don't overspend it. Isn't that the problem that we have right now? Overspend it. Do it yourself. Don't wait for anybody to do it when you know you can do it yourself. That's the government. You cannot just wait for the government to do your things. Sometimes you have to just grab the shovel and start you know start making a hole in the ground. It's just human nature, right? Now we have the rise of modern femininity, modern females. I'm not gonna say the F word because I can give. Let me just say feminism, feminism. When you have feminism going around, it's time to shift the poles. Anybody that knows a little bit of relationship between man and a woman, what happened when the poles are changed? The relationships crumble. When man goes to emotional state and female go to the logic state, the relationship always end up breaking up. That's what's going on now. So feminism has basically taken down that role, shifted right to a way where the the structures are crumbling because the base is being compromised. We build a big tower with a strong foundation. We're taking that foundation out, hoping that the rest of the building that has been constructed and took years is gonna sustain. You can't sustain that. I'm very glad that a lot of people are going back to spirituality, bringing back a lot of Christian values, right? And I understand not everybody is Christian, but you like to be in a Christian nation, right? Okay, so let's just leave it there. My opinion, just to close it up. Very glad that information like this is available because it gives you a clear understanding how a man should carry himself especially when it comes to interviews like this. If he notice he's very stoic, real, say little words but say a lot. When he says something, you can notice it comes from a genuine place, and I respect that. Very good interview. Let me know what you guys think. Do you guys have the same reaction? Do you guys are getting the same information I'm getting? Do you guys agree with me? Do you guys disagree with me? It doesn't matter. I really appreciate it. Let me know in the comment section below, and I'm gonna really appreciate it. Make sure you subscribe. Let's just get to that 1,000 subscriber.